A cold front is moving east with a storm system heading for the eastern lakes, and it's going to be producing some rain and some heavier downpours, and even a rumble or two of thunder not out of the question as we move through this afternoon and tonight in the east. We have another stronger system coming for Wednesday, and that might introduce some wind issues for the Northeast and the Northern Mid-Atlantic states. So we will take a look at that, talk about the long range, maybe regurgitate the holidays a little bit. Who knows? All of that and more today on the Joe and Joe Weather Show. Back from a 4-day vacation brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, and Southwest Suffolk County on Long Island, serving the entire New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, tri-state area with everything you need this upcoming winter. And you know what? Don't wait until there's a snow or ice threat. This is a good time to just kind of get prepped for it. And they are Long Island's largest provider of rock salt, and also they have all the great snowmelt products out there like Pelado and Mag ice pellets and flakes. And maybe, just maybe, you want a new snowblower under your Christmas tree. And of course, all the other things you need to make sure you get through any kind of winter storm with minimal inconvenience. 631-756-1125. They have the best prices anywhere, and of course, the website is
OmniTrueValue.com. Don't you ever forget that, Joe.
No, we shouldn't. So, being that this is now the Sunday after Thanksgiving, it is time now, Joe. We have lit the Christmas tree. Although I did briefly toy with the idea that since the Christmas tree has been up all year round, but unlit.
But you've been ahead of us now, because the last couple of days Renata and I have been putting up our own tree. It's a new tree, and it's not yet completely up, and it is illuminated. But I said, Joe has been ahead of us in the game, in this Christmas tree game, for a while, going all the way back to last year.
Well, I leave it. It's really for my grandsons. When they come, they see the tree, and they think that it's Grandpa's house is a fun place to be. Not that there's presents under the tree when they come every time, but now, of course, although my dark humor was got to be a little earlier, and I thought, you know what, maybe I should take the tree down now.
Well, you have that I have that same dark humor. I always said that if I ever got enough money, I'd buy a radio station, and the radio station that I bought would be one where we would play Christmas music through the entire year, but then right after Thanksgiving, we'd convert over to regular pop or contemporary music during the holidays. So we would be the only station not broadcasting. And of course, as soon as Thanksgiving arrived, up here in New York, we have WLTW, also on Long Island, Walk 97.5, and they're into 24/7 Christmas music. Another station that is in our area, WHUD here in the Hudson Valley, now into 24/7 Christmas music. So what else can I say? It's not even December yet, but already it is Christmas time. Like it or not.
Right. And last year, of course, today on this date, last year at this time, I was already out of surgery and in my bed at the hospital because I had the emergency appendectomy, which I had after I had 9 people over for Thanksgiving dinner, spiking fevers all day long. But that's another story for another time. However, your Thanksgiving went well. I have to tell you, my red wine brine was a huge hit. My guests all told me it was the best turkey they ever had. I could not necessarily say the same thing because they ate all of it. I mean, by the time I got to sit down on my plate, I was literally picking shreds off the bones because it was a 19-pound turkey. This wasn't a small turkey, but they shredded it They shredded it, ate it, which was great. And what little I had of it, it did taste very good. So for those of you who have never done a red wine brine, for your turkey or have never brined a turkey before, I highly recommend it. I brined it for 72 hours, and it was outstanding. It really was outstanding. The breast, Joe, when you cut the breast meat, um, when we started, my brother was carving the breast meat. The meat it was I've never seen breast meat juicy. It's always looks kind of dry. This was all wet, moist, and just absolutely delicious.
You know what I'm thinking of as you're describing all of this and all your guests taking everything that they could get out of the turkey? I'm thinking about that cartoon with Daffy Duck and those two guys who were stuck up in the Arctic. And finally, Daffy Duck says, "How would you gentlemen like a turkey dinner?" And, the whole table is set with this gorgeous turkey dinner and all the stuffing and everything else. And all of a sudden, all the mice come and they clean everything out so that the only thing that's left is the bone on the turkey. And that
Yeah,
sounds that's I mean, I'm not talking about the mice, but it sounds like right after your Thanksgiving, that pretty much was your Thanksgiving, that you had hardly anything to pick off for yourself.
yeah,
Uh,
it really was was very good. So, moving along, we've got some weather to deal with this week, and certainly today we've got this storm system that is bringing rain to just about everybody except for northern Maine. Northern Maine may wind up getting some snow out of this. And Wednesday to me looks kind of interesting for the northern mid-Atlantic states and up into New England, because I think we could have about a pretty solid 6 to 8 hour period of fairly strong winds uh, late Wednesday afternoon into Wednesday night. I'm thinking maybe gusts of 40 plus from the south southwest ahead of that front.
well, before we get into the Wednesday weather, today we may actually see, and I think by 1 o'clock, virtually everybody in the immediate New York tri-state area will be experiencing wet weather. But it's going to be a short-lived surge, if you will, where about 3/4 of an inch of rain is not a whole heck of a lot. But if you spread it out over 24 hours, but it looks like a goodly amount of that is going to come over a 6 hour period. So that could lead to some minor flooding issues for a few places. You mentioned at the top of the show that there might even be a rumble or two of thunder. I certainly concur for that. And the sun came out about 15 minutes ago. I'm saying the sun is out. What is the sun doing? It must have been like a fortuitous break in the clouds, because it does indeed, looking at the radar, that a lot of areas are going to be just swamped by rain, and some of it could briefly come down in spurts of heavy during this afternoon. I'll tell you what, yesterday was the day, Joe. Yesterday was the day to put up, especially if you have extensive decorations out of doors. Yesterday was it was gorgeous. I mean, we had sunshine, temperatures were in the 50s, not much in the way of wind. I did my usual climbing up the 15-foot little giant ladder to get to the peak of the roof of the house here to string lights, and it was great. Today, on the other hand, well, in another hour or two, it's going to be anything but perfect to be out of doors. Hopefully, you'll be indoors for that. And then for Wednesday, well, yeah, we could very well see wind. It's the old 1-2 punch. First, we get wet, and then we get the wind. So it looks like an active week coming up of weather here in the Northeast.
Yeah, and here in the southeast, at least up here in North Georgia, we had some heavy downpours overnight, and I got up at 6:30 this morning. They were just about done at that point, and now it's blue sky and sunshine here with a gusty wind and temperatures that are in the 60s. So once the show is done, I'm gonna probably go out to the trails and do some hiking this afternoon, which has become a daily habit now, me and the dog. Chuck Cardillo is an early super chat hitter, hitting the tip jar on this Sunday. Thank you so much, Chuck, for your generous tip jar hit. And on that note, we can switch over to the satellite loop. I know a number of you on the chat board are talking about the NAO and the EPO and all the rest of it. I'm going to get into that in just a bit. But this, I think back, Joe, to some of the winters, by the way, that where the activity has been relatively active, where the activity has been frequent, and where winter weather tends to dominate more often than not. And I've gotten that flavor from the way this part of November, this month of November has occurred. We're starting to get these storm systems that are beginning to move up toward the Great Lakes, which is actually pretty common this time of year. You can see the rotation on the satellite back into Indiana and Illinois. The heavier bright white cloud covers in that arm, that sort of nice, well-defined comma-shaped arm swinging through the eastern states. And we might even see a little bit of severe weather out of this in parts of Virginia and
Right.
maybe even into eastern North Carolina.
And by the way, you just like a light bulb that suddenly clicked on above my head. We're talking about Wednesday and the wind. Guess what? Wednesday is the day when they're going to light the tree at Rockefeller Center. And
Oh, good luck. Good luck
good
with
luck.
that.
I mean, now, when we talk about wind, I want Joe and I want to stress here, it's not the northwest wind that you would expect at this time of the year, which drives in all the frigidly cold air. This wind is going to be from the south and west. Joe, not only are the surface winds coming from a southwesterly direction with a rather tight gradient, but the upper level winds by later in the day on Wednesday will be coming straight from Texas and the Gulf of Mexico right up into the eastern United States. So we have southwesterly winds aloft. We have southwesterly winds at the surface, tight gradient on both, and I would agree with you. Those winds are going to be roaring come Wednesday late into Wednesday evening, and it's going to be very interesting to see how they play this out, because not only are they going to have to deal with the wind, they'll also have to deal with the rain. If there's one thing that may hold the crowd down this year from seeing the initial lighting of the tree, this might just be it as far as Wednesday is concerned.
Yeah, now knowing that that's going to be problematic weather-wise on Wednesday, most certainly, with the dynamics involved. And you can see from the loop, we're in this kind of fast flow west to east pattern. Everything, cold fronts coming through every couple of days. You can already see there's more energy that's coming into the northwest, and that is going to be part of the ingredients for the system for Wednesday. Here's a tight satellite loop and of the east, and it's not looping for some reason. It's just kind of standing still at the moment. Let me see if I can add a few frames to it and fix it a little bit. All right, there it is. Yep, now it's looping. So let me just make it I'll make it a teensy bit bigger for everybody to see. And I could see, by the way, you said you broke out into some sun. I could see why, because there was like a little hole there that moved over the Hudson Valley about an hour or two ago.
Yeah, and when it came out, actually, it was only about a half an hour ago. The shining brightly through the windows, and I'm saying, what the heck is this all about? I mean, and the first thing that came into my mind was sunshine now before a heavy dose of rain. And I said, oh, that's great. Get the sun out, make the atmosphere a bit unstable, and before you know it, we'll have a locally heavy thunderstorm to deal with as well. So
yeah,
that's the way the ball sometimes bounces.
SPC, we haven't been really doing much in the way of severe weather, but it does show up today. There's a marginal risk of severe weather in southeastern Virginia, eastern North Carolina. That is also, by the way, a tornado risk area of 2%. And moving along to tomorrow, there is no severe weather risk tomorrow, and only a small area of thunderstorm risk in northeast Texas, northwest Louisiana, southwestern Arkansas. But Tuesday, here we are on day 3, and already SPC, and this is ahead of this developing low, we have an enhanced risk of severe weather already indicated for northeast Louisiana, northwest Mississippi, eastern Arkansas, southwest Tennessee, and just touching into southeasternmost Missouri, and the larger area of slight risk and marginal risk, obviously. I think this could be there's going to be some tornado issues here on Tuesday with this next developing system in the lower Mississippi Valley down to the western Gulf Coast.
You may be right, and it makes me also question. You see such a broad area, both of general thunderstorm coverage and also for potential marginal and slight and even enhanced thunderstorm activity. You would have thought that on day 4, they would have moved some of that eastward and would have had some place outlined in yellow, but they don't. They say that the probability is too low for making a projection for convective activity on Wednesday. And I find that kind of strange because, again, there's just so much on day 3. You would think that a little bit of that would spill over into day 4, but they don't have anything.
Well, they say predictability too low, not probability of too low, because the probability of potential too low is on day 5, when, of course, everything is long gone. But they do have predictability too low. I would not be surprised if this afternoon, or maybe, well, tomorrow it'll be in the day 3 time frame. I would not be surprised if we see severe weather risks, because I think between this is a pretty solid upper trough that's going to be swinging through the east. On top of that, you're going to have this low that heads to the Great Lakes and really deepens when it gets up into Canada. It's going to get down into the 970s in terms of pressure. So it's going to be quite the powerhouse there. I think the pieces are there that there certainly could be some severe weather. Now, I don't know if it's going to be much beyond. Will they have marginal? Probably. Will they have slight risk? Possibly. I don't think they're going to have anything beyond that. But I'm expecting that they are going to put up some sort of risk, indicate some sort of risk here for Wednesday.
I would have at least put, by sheer extrapolation, going from, let's say, day 2 to day 3, I would have put something for day 4, and I would have put like a zone in yellow, indicating 15% for maybe the Virginias, the Carolinas, that area. I don't anticipate right now that we would be in a severe situation here, although that could certainly change in the opinion of the forecasters at SPC between now and tomorrow. But again, I was just a little surprised that there was not something for Wednesday. But again, I agree with you. Things will likely change. We will probably see an area of severe on the day 3 for tomorrow, for Wednesday. But we'll just, I guess for the moment, we'll just play it by ear. We already have warned everybody of the wind and the rain that's coming for Wednesday anyway.
Yes, I would have, sensed, Joe, that this is probably where I had a feeling that looking at all of this, that it would have, for you, raised an eyebrow. Not both eyebrows, but just raised an eyebrow. And as you and I both know, the folks at SPC, even though they have so much work to do, they waste no time in listening to watching the Joe and Joe Weather Show.
They watch us all the time.
They watch us almost continuously. They binge watch. They binge watch past episodes. Like I was doing binge watching Yellowstone and getting all caught up on that particular series. Here's the radar.
Incidentally, if you could just chat for about a minute or two, because I have to take care of something in another room. But continue, okay. And I will be back.
Well, make sure you turn off your headset.
Yes.
Okay. Now, hold on. Just a second, folks. Hang on, folks. I'm just trying to mute that noise. Okay, so that hopefully takes care of it. You're not hearing it, and only I'm hearing it. So anyway, here's the loaded radar, and the rain's, it's a little bit blotchy in terms of intensity. You can see there's some heavier downpours moving through upstate New York. So a couple of heavier downpours approaching the Pennsylvania, New Jersey border, down into southeastern Virginia and into North Carolina, seeing also some patchy areas of some heavier downpours. There might even be a rumble or two of thunder in there somewhere. And that precipitation extends back, the rain does, into Indiana, northwest Ohio, across into Michigan, and on up into southern Wisconsin and western Illinois. The leading edge now moving up through I-90. And by the way, in western New York, in northern New York, where and northwest Pennsylvania, where of course a week ago we were talking about the epic lake effect snow event. This is all rain for everybody. It's a very, very warm setup we have here in the eastern part of the United States. Meanwhile, out in the west, it's colder, and they've got snow showing up on the radar in parts of Montana, Wyoming, and back up into Idaho and northwest Montana, and on up into the Pacific Northwest. Also see some rain showers moving in there. We can look at WPC's probability for at least 2 inches of snow. And let's get the states on here. So it looks pretty good. I don't know if they have a big giant hole in eastern Montana and over North Dakota, but you can see that's a fairly large area of snow where the probability of at least a couple of inches is 50% or more, which is in the blue. And that's through Washington, Oregon, Idaho, into Wyoming, and then going on northeast from there on up into the western part of the Great Lakes, and then in the east there isn't a whole lot happening here, just up in northern Maine, where we have the possibility that we could see a couple of inches of snow out of this. I'm just going to come back here for a moment and hang on just 1 second here. And there he is. Okay, so I got to unmute Joe Rayo. There you go.
Hey.
Yeah, you're back. I had to mute you because whatever you did or didn't do, I was getting that lovely tone that sounds like the emergency broadcast system.
Oh.
Okay.
But I did turn off my headset, so.
Yeah, so maybe what we should do is if you have to, if you have to, how shall we say, head for the throne again, you can leave the headsets turned on and I'll just mute you from my end. Unless, of course, you could, leave it open and we could just use that as background, let's call it natural sound.
Well, anyway.
So anyway,
I see Leon Pravitsky says he's driving. He said he did food shopping and bought more lights for Christmas, and now I am driving again. Beat the rain. That's right, Leon. Get out there and before it all goes downhill after 12 noon with all of the wet stuff coming.
By the way, big hello to Alfred K. Phillips of watching us almost every night and day from Wainwright, Alaska, where I think it's now all dark for the next couple of months. Or at best an hour or so of twilight at where he is.
Right. We talked about this before, that when the sun goes below the horizon for an extended length of time up in the northern climes, it doesn't necessarily get completely dark immediately. There is twilight, and even up at the North Pole, Joe, I think the twilight runs from late September into the early part of November. Up at the pole, it's certainly dark now, and where Mr. Phillips is, I think he's at latitude 71 or 72 degrees north. So yeah. He may have twilight, but it ain't much of twilight sky. It certainly is rather dark now, and will continue to be dark for the next couple of months.
Okie doke. So let's go to let's translate over to the weather WPC. Also, they watch us religiously, and the rainfall forecast here. Actually, I'm sorry, I stand corrected. Liquid precip forecast for the Northeast, and this is for today. And I'll do a 2-day total, so that'll include anything that falls after 7 o'clock tonight. But you're looking generally at a fairly large swath of a half to 3/4 of an inch from central and southern Maine down through Vermont and New Hampshire, much of New York State, much of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, down into Delaware and Virginia, back through Ohio and northeast Indiana. Also some lighter precip, 1/4 to a half, a few pockets a little higher up in the central Rockies, central and northern Rockies, and also on up into the Pacific Northwest. Now, let's add Wednesdays to all of this, and we're going to see a repeat performance because these amounts here in the east basically double with regards to total liquid precip. And most of that, by the way, is going to be rain, except at the end when the wind shifts in western New York. There's probably going to be some lake effect in parts of western New York. Nothing like what just happened a week ago, but certainly there is going to be some. And also, you can see very heavy rains being forecast for the next 7 days in the Pacific Northwest because the Pacific. One of the things I've noticed, by the way, Joe, when we always like to look at the Pacific, especially during the wintertime, to see what state it's in. We've referred to oftentimes how the Pacific can sometimes get into a situation where it's like a fire hose with a straight flow from Asia right across the Pacific to North America, which is just basically floods the United States with warm air. I have to tell you, at least from my observations over the last 6 weeks, regardless of the kind of weather we've been having here, there is nothing resembling a fire hose in the Pacific Northwest going into this winter. And I think that, to me, checks another one of those boxes that says that this coming winter is going to be a bit different than what we've seen in the past, say, 4 or 5 years.
Well, I'm remembering back to that fire hose you mentioned out in the West. Was it 2 years ago that we had that fire hose extending across the Atlantic, and we were having record airline flights going from, let's say, New York to London in record time because of the tremendous upper level winds. The winds were literally driving those planes rapidly across, and it was very much like as you just mentioned, a fire hose. It was straight across from the Northeast United States to Europe, and again, remember that this is the third consecutive year that we're in La Nina conditions for the wintertime. So we may again be seeing between now and, let's say, February, a lot of setups where we're going to be seeing the so-called fire hose in effect, either across the Atlantic or.
I'm going to say that this year is. Certainly, it could change to that. I don't deny that, but I'm just at least saying that now that we're in, especially during this month and through now that we're in late November, there's no sign of any fire hose. There's a lot of amplitude in the Pacific. There's actually, I'm just pulling up, for example, at 60 hours, you actually have a split flow out here, which is pretty interesting. Upper ridge building up into the Aleutians in Alaska, but there's a very active southern part of that jet that is set up for. This is for the middle of next week, obviously, and even if you go to the long ranges, but there's more going on in the Pacific, including a low that's supposed to cut off and drop down toward Hawaii. But we're not seeing. At the end of the forecast period, you're not seeing that. When we say a fire hose, these lines here pretty much just kind of line up west to east like this. You are seeing instead more where they're kind of going up and down, with troughs along the way. So I don't know. I have my view is, at least on the Pacific side, that it's going to be different. You're right about the Atlantic side. And I think it's been more than just a couple of years ago. I think we've seen that Atlantic. I think we even had the Atlantic fire hose for a while last year, and a total lack of storm activity, non-tropical storm activity in the Atlantic. And at least so far, it's been a little bit different this month. There's more activity happening, which again I think could be telling us and that things may be a bit different. And by the way, I've pulled up the GFS at day 10, and I'm sure everybody is looking at that big, gigantic purple area sitting over Greenland. There is blockiness. Actually, I call it more than blockiness. It's a strong block that's trying to develop here. It'll remains to be seen if that happens. But the models certainly overnight and yesterday and the day before and the day before that have been telegraphing this idea of the block that's over Scandinavia to push westward into Greenland and into northern Canada. This is setting us up for what could be a colder flow not too many days into the future.
Yeah, some of that cold air could very well, if not forcefully push on down suddenly into central Canada, for example, or into the central United States, certainly ooze, if you will, spill over the rim of the Earth and down into our neck of the woods. Maybe not again immediately, but perhaps sometime in the middle or latter part of December.
Yeah, and a few folks have been pointing to those, talking about the teleconnections, and they're important, but I cannot emphasize enough that they are not the end all, and you have to use it with a great deal of many grains of salt. They can tell you about the sort of general broad scale pattern. They're not going to tell you necessarily where the troughs and ridges are going to be. So you have to remember that. You could have all these teleconnections flashing the kind of signals you want, but you could still wind up with troughs setting up for snow and cold weather if that's what you're looking for, because not everybody is. But it may not be where you are. It could be over the Midwest. It could be in the Ohio and Tennessee Valley. The block could be so strong that everything is to the south, and that's when the middle and South Atlantic states wind up seeing wintertime weather. But this is a very cold look to the upper air that we're seeing, and the other thing I would point out is that the Europeans kind of been doing the same thing. Now the European only goes out to 10 days, but the European's been kind of doing the same thing in its long range. This is a view for Thursday when you see that trough. When we're talking about for the system for Wednesday night, it is a bit of a powerhouse here that is setting up south of Hudson's Bay. But I think we continue. We're taking this step at a time, Joe. And I think the idea is the atmosphere looks like it wants to go into a colder mode in December. We've been talking about that for the last, I don't know, 6 weeks or so. And I will, I'm going to double down. I still think that this could be be an interesting December. My only note of caution is I know I'm a horrible. I do not like cliches, and a few people are using the phrase "it'll be a December to remember." I would just say, why don't you wait until something happens before we start throwing out cliches like that? Because they have been thrown out. Those cliches have been used. That particular cliche for the month of December has been used. And we've had Decembers to remember, Joe, but not in the way that snow lovers would like. So
Exactly, and also now I know that you don't normally get to this until later in the show, but I did take a peek at the 10 millibar to see where the polar vortex is, and it looks like it's going to.
Would you like to show it? I can certainly.
Oh well, yeah, I could certainly bring it up. I know you, along with Mrs. Ann Sambles, you love to show that 10 millibar map.
Oh
But I'll be
yes,
happy.
Mr. Polar Vortex.
But Mr. Polar Vortex is, and I will show that if you allow me to. But the thing is that it appears that early in the month of December, that Mr. Polar Vortex is going to split a little bit. Well, maybe more than just a little bit. Now let me just get my bearings straight here.
Yeah, I know. I have to do the same thing.
I'm
I'm trying to. Whoops. Hold on a second. There you go. Okay.
So this, and I might point out, this is the 12Z run. This is it's so wonderful to be able to access GFS information during the 11 o'clock Sunday morning show when we were held to restrictions by the occurrence of daylight saving time on into early November. But this is the 10 millibar.
Can you, by the way, can you just slide them? There you go. Perfect. Go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to get the time. So that's unfortunate because I can't see the in order to show it. Well, wait a minute. Let me just do this then. Hang on. Can I still do it? Yeah, that works. That works for me, and I'm sure it'll work for all of you. So this is the 12Z 10 millibar map for this morning, November 27th. And as we move things along here, you could see how the vortex is kind of spiraling around in, I guess you could call that northern or western sections of of Greenland. And then as we move on into December the 4th and 5th, look what happens. The vortex is beginning to split, and it does split. And we now have two separate entities, one that's almost over the pole, but the other entity, the one that has split off, is now down over Hudson Bay and central Canada. And as we continue to move along, well, we can't because we're up to 240 hours, and that's where we are confined to right now. Eventually, we'll get to 384, but that won't come for maybe another 15 or 20 minutes. But you can see a most definite splitting of the polar vortex, and the flow is coming straight out of the Great Slave Lake area, out of the north and northwest for the western U.S. Then it kind of slides around through the plain states, and we're kind of in a it looks like we're not exactly in a cold flow, at least not just yet, but we have kind of a west or west-southwesterly flow here in the northeast. And meanwhile, the folks are still rather mild down over the southern tier of the U.S., including the Florida Peninsula.
By the way, notice, I know it's at the 240, so you don't have beyond, but that big brown blotch that is across northern Siberia, when you loop that, that's another warm air attack of the polar vortex that's getting underway. So, the vortex splits, then unsplits, then splits again, and maybe as it tries to unsplit, that next attack might tear it apart. And the reason why it's so important is if you have a weak polar vortex, that tends to favor colder air spreading out at the lower levels of the atmosphere further south. When you have a wrapped up, powerful polar vortex sitting in the Arctic region, those are those winters where it's only cold way up in Canada, and the cold air never seems to come down except for brief periods down into the United States. It's all wrapped up underneath that polar vortex. So you for winter weather, you want to see something like this where it's not strong, it's spread out, it's stretchy, almost like a piece of taffy getting stretched, because that's when you wind up having things happen. The other thing I would mention too, I talked about this at the top of the show about I think I mentioned the fact that the snow cover in the northern hemisphere is at its largest state in 56 years, which takes us back to 1966. Okay. Since 1960, the winter of 66, 67, and I was reading this article, Joe, looking at, they mentioned 5 other winters where the snow cover was sort of along the same lines that we have now. The idea being, of course, is that if you have snow cover that is extensive, that's an ingredient to be able to manufacture cold air in the colder regions of North America and on up in the Arctic region and so on. But in those particular winters that I was reading about how particularly in 66, 67, one of the things which was a very snowy winter in the Northeast and into the Mid-Atlantic states, but what stood out to me was the fact that there were a couple of major league lake effect snow events that occurred in western New York and also in other places in and around the Great Lakes, and it goes back to what I was saying, what I've been saying during that whole lake effect snow event. Those types of things do not happen in winters where that are warm and not active. I think they are a sign of where we're going in the next couple of months.
We added another 12 hours. We're up to 252 hours, and the broad area of red that you mentioned is still there over Siberia. And the winter of 66, 67 stands out in my memory for 3 reasons. One, we had the Christmas Eve, Christmas morning snowstorm here in the Northeast. In the New York area, we picked up, I think, 6 or 7 inches, the so-called Donner and Blitzen snowstorm, thunder and lightning occurring during that Christmas Eve of 66. Also, we had the blizzard of 67, February 9th, 1967. There was 12.5 inches of snow at Central Park. And also to finish out the winter, on or around the 20th or 21st of March, we had a surprise. We had 10 inches of snow, and it got several of the politicos in New York rather upset because the forecast for that final burst of snow was for nothing more than just a few flurries or a little light snow, and they ended up with 10 inches. And some of the politicians were saying, what are we doing? What are those guys at the weather bureau? They don't know anything or whatever. Blah 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 blah. But anyway, that was certainly a standout winter. If you like snow and if you like cold, that winter of 66, 67 was a standout. And if this is leading into a repeat of something like that, then a lot of people by the end of this winter season will be very, very happy.
All right, so switch me back and we can take a look at the upper air on the new GFS. By the way, I've noticed this has been an ongoing problem, Joe, with the GFS in particular. So I just be when you look at it in the long range, you have to be a little bit skeptical of whatever it's doing to an extent, and what what it has been having. I don't know why it keeps doing this, but it keeps trying to develop these tropical storms, and it's driving me crazy because none of them have happened. I just stop it already with it. But the model seems to be doing this on almost every run, that there's some sort of what I would call tropical feedback, especially in the longer range part of the forecast period, and that has an impact on how the model behaves overall. It tends to do weird things, but more importantly, if you're going to have a tropical system being indicated, say in the Caribbean, or as was the case, I think on Saturday or Friday, it had something north of Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic. That's going to build a ridge in the southeast part of the United States and off the southeast coast of the United States. And that could change the whole profile of what the upper air looks like. So if you see the model do weird things, it could be because it's doing weird things in the tropics. And I'm just looking at the new model run. I'll have to look at it deeper. I don't see any tropical feedback on this run, which is good because it makes it a cleaner run and you could maybe rely on it a bit more. But here's our system for today in the upper air. The trough is going to be over us. Tomorrow we'll get a quick shot of colder air into Tuesday, then a big warm up with this next deep trough swinging around for Wednesday and Wednesday night. And as you said, Joe, the gradient, the upper air winds are the gradient in the upper air as well as at the surface extremely tight. That lifts out. We kind of go into a flat west-east ridge for the rest of the next week and into the weekend. And then eventually the block settles up near Greenland. You've got another upper high building up in Alaska. There's your negative East Pacific oscillation in play. And you kind of have a colder-looking upper air by the time we get to, say, December, let's say after December 6th or 7th. It does start to look a bit colder. And look, as far as anything from the standpoint of any kind of winter weather precipitation, we'll have to, of course, leave that to the short range. But the upper air is doing the kind of thing you want it to do if you want winter weather.
Yeah, so there is some hope, folks, if you are a winter weather buff. It's been rather strange. Last year we had above normal snowfall. I think the year before we had what do we have, like 5 inches at Central Park? You really can't say or put a finger just by saying, oh, it's a La Nina winter. It's going to be this or it's going to be that. We've had variations, and so we'll see what happens this particular season with how much cold and how much snow we get in and around our area.
Okay, so I'm going to put up pivotal weather here. Because I purchased a commercial license which allows me to share the maps. So I will be doing that from time to time. I'm just trying to find, I'm jumping to Wednesday here. I want to see if I could find the 2-meter wind gusts. There we go. Got it. Just to show what the European is forecasting here. So this is at 7 o'clock Wednesday evening, Joe. They've got gusts up over 50 miles an hour up and down the New Jersey shore, over Long Island, but also in the Hudson Valley, in the Connecticut River Valley, in northwest New Jersey. It's basically a pretty large area, 40 to 50 mile an hour gusts. This again is for 7 p.m. on Wednesday. Doesn't go. This is the last run, was the 6Z run. I don't think the 0Z is going to be that much different, but this is what it looks like. It's also wind starting to 30 to 40 miles an hour in southeastern New England. I'm going to switch over to the mid-Atlantic view so we can see areas further to the south. And here too, we're seeing wind gusts a shade lower, but still every bit of 40 miles an hour or higher. So I'm thinking lots of wind advisories will be going up at the very least when we get to Wednesday.
Okay, and somebody on the chat board was asking about how much snow did Central. It was Keith James II. How much snow did Central Park get in '66? Well, we were making reference not to '66 proper, but '66, '67. And it's interesting to point out that in November of '66, they had nothing. Central Park did 9.1 inches. That's from that Christmas Eve snowstorm in December of '66. Then a paltry 1.4 inches in January. And people probably at the end of January, the snow lovers were saying, geez, I thought it was going to be a great year for snow. Boom. In came that blizzard in February of 1967. Total snow for February of '67, a very respectable 23.6 inches. And as I mentioned, they had snow at the end of winter, the beginning of spring, right around the 20th, 21st of March. And that helped to bring the snowfall total to 17.4, a whopping 17.4 for the month of March of '67. Total snowfall for the winter of '66, '67, 51.5 inches. So there you go. Except for January, that winter was a winter for snow lovers. And again, we'll see what happens this year. And did you say wind gusts, Jersey Shore, and even in the tri-state area, 40 to 50 miles per hour on Wednesday evening?
Yeah, inland and coast. Yes, on the European.
I hope they have that. I hope they have that tree, secure on Wednesday. That would be really something to see. I've never seen the tree sway, but that kind of wind could certainly do that, or make it do that. So it'll be interesting. Interesting evening television entertainment, folks, watching. And the thing that drives me crazy, Joe, is that when you and I were young, and they would light the tree at Rockefeller Center. What they would do is they would do it during the 6 o'clock news. Sometime during the 6 o'clock news, they'd cut away to Rockefeller Center and they'd say, okay, we're going to light the tree now. And Mayor Wagner or Mayor Lindsay or whoever would push the button. Boom, the tree would light up. They'd sing, jingle bells or whatever. Boom, that was it. And then it was back to the news. Now they turned this into a gigantic production, which starts like at 7 o'clock at night and runs till 10 o'clock in the evening. And it's not until 9:59 and 30 seconds before the show ends that they finally get around to lighting the tree, which is, to me, annoying. But it won't be annoying if, they have all of these people out there trying to sing and dance or whatever like that with windswept rain and 50-mile-per-hour wind. So it'll be something to watch, I think, on Wednesday evening.
Well, we can actually keep an eye on things from while we're doing our show.
Yes.
All right, let's run through the I'm going to run through the GFS really quick as we're coming up to the lunchtime hour. Not that I'm hungry, but because I made myself eggs and applewood bacon this morning, which was delicious. There's your low for today with the rain area that's moving through, everything moving along. A quick shot of chillier air behind it, but nothing to write home about. Then, of course, you've got all this energy that's coming into the northwest with some snows there. Again, not much. A low does develop and comes out of Kansas and heads on up very quickly. By early Wednesday morning, that low is a 996 low sitting in Lake Superior with the trailing cold front that is going to be extending southward. The weather here in the east should be mostly quiet. into the first part of Wednesday. But then once it gets into Canada, this is where that system really starts to deepen as it approaches James Bay. It gets down to almost a 980 low by the time we get to Wednesday evening. You see the weather front up and down the eastern seaboard, a million isobars here with a big high offshore. So you've got a really tight gradient with the southwest flow, and there's also some snow behind it. With the strong northwest flow behind it coming off the lakes. The front is through by Thursday. Quick shot of cold air Thursday into Friday, and then that goes out. And then we start to see the mechanics of the block at work where it tries to start to spread out some colder air from Canada, particularly longer term after around the 6th. The GFS is trying to take some kind of a low up from Kansas northeast to western New York and into Maine. Keep an eye on that block because if that block is stronger and presses further to the south, you could see that track be a little bit weaker and further south. And you can see where the cold air now is starting to come down out of Canada with a big high. By the way, I noticed yesterday, I don't know if it had it today. Let me just take a look real quick. Because you don't see this too often. Hang on. Oh, they don't have the map for the preset map for the hemispheric. So let's try North America. Let's do that one. And they had on one of the runs the high underneath that big block building over Greenland, Joe. It had a 10.7, I think it was the GFS, had a 1077 high up there, or some ridiculous, some absolutely ridiculous number. I'm looking today. It's kind of hard to see. I can't read it. It's like a 50-something high, which is a bit more, which is strong enough. And let's say, now we're in the 60s. So it gets it to like 63. I think it's at 63. No, it's a 53. I'm sorry. The print is very small here. But that was that kind of caught my attention on the I think on one of the overnight runs that there was like a 1070 something high up there, which was just crazy.
Well, I'll tell you, this is kind of a historic day, 1938, which was also a Sunday, I might add, and this is from our friend weather analyst Rob Friedowitz, who points out that on this day in 1938, again, it was a Sunday as well, just 6 weeks after the latest 90-degree reading on record for Central Park, which still stands, I might add, we had back-to-back snowstorms, which dropped nearly 13 inches of snow on New York City in just 4 days. This is November of 1938. The first, which was on November 24th, 25th, beginning the night of Thanksgiving Day, measured 8.8 inches, while the snowfall that ended before dawn today and began late last night brought an additional 4 inches. The high-low during these 4 days was 3220, which was 18 degrees below average, and this would be the snowiest month of the winter of 38-39 and the third snowiest November on record after November of 1898 and 1881. So if you were back here in the New York area in 1938, you would have had to be outside with your snow shovel because had a lot of snow, a lot of cold weather. And again, this all came 6 weeks after the latest 90-degree reading, I think it was in early October, on record in Central Park. So as the late Tex Antoine used to say sometimes on his weathercasts, weather do change.
It does. Leon Probitsky hitting the Super Chat tip jar today. Thank you very much. We got a nice crowd on this Sunday. But I think it's time that we say goodbye because, like I said, the weather's nice here. I want to go out in the mountain and climb it. So everybody, Joe and I will be back tomorrow night at 7:30. Those of you who are on my weather platform on Patreon, I'm doing two things new. One is weather in a minute, because a lot of you folks like to all compressed in a minute. So I'm trying to do that. So that's a new thing I'm doing. But for Patreon members, every day I'm going to be doing a short, at least once a day, and maybe more when we get to the point where we start having more snow events. But I'll be doing a snow video just kind of showing where it is snowing and what may be going on with regards to snow, particularly in the eastern part of the United States, when that becomes relevant. So that's something new for those of you who are on that on my subscription platform. It's patreon.com/meteorologist Joe Cioffi. The link is on the descriptor to this video, and the links are kind of all over the place, but that's what it is. So thank you, and I appreciate those of you who have joined up and appreciate your support. So on that note, Joe, we will see you tomorrow at 7:30.
7:35.
7:35 yes. Tomorrow night, 7:35. Never forget the 5. And everybody, have a great Sunday afternoon. Finish up your turkey leftovers, and we'll see you tomorrow. Not nighty night. Have a good rest of your day.
Bye-bye.